The Legacy of Time, Parallel Universes. The sky above the Wells family's home was dark with gathering clouds, but inside, things were quiet. Jade, Mallory, Valerie, and Cody sat around the dinner table, an unusual silence settling over them. It had been a week since they had returned from the Kismet realm, and though life had resumed some semblance of normalcy, the looming threat of the hooded man weighed heavily on their minds. Claire watched them from the kitchen, her keen eyes noticing the subtle tension in her husband's posture, the furrow of Cody's brow, and the way Mallory seemed to avoid eye contact with anyone. She stepped forward, placing a hand on Jade's shoulder. "We can't keep living like this," Claire said softly, breaking the silence. Jade nodded but didn't say anything. He knew she was right. The family was stronger now, more united than ever, but the specter of the hooded man's eventual return hung over them like a dark cloud. Mallory shifted in his seat, his voice low but clear. "We need to prepare. The hooded man is coming, it's only a matter of time." Valerie, always direct, leaned forward. "And what exactly are we supposed to do? We don't even know where he is, what he's planning, or how to stop him. That's why we need to start looking." Mallory replied. "He's not going to give up. He's been pulling the strings for years, and I don't doubt he's already planning his next move." Cody glanced at his father. "Do you think the Guardians will help us again? Or the Kismets?" Jade sighed. "The Guardians warned us not to rely on them for everything. The Kismets. They'll guide us, but they won't fight our battles for us. We need to find our own way to stop the hooded man." Mallory's green eyes darkened as he spoke. "He'll come for me again. The hooded man never leaves unfinished business. He'll try to manipulate me, just like before. But you're stronger now," Jade said firmly, looking at his brother. "We'll all be ready when he comes." Mallory gave a faint nod, though doubt flickered in his eyes. He wasn't sure if he was ready. He had spent so long under the hooded man's control that the idea of resisting him still felt foreign. Claire, ever the voice of reason, stepped in. "Then we start preparing now. We can't wait for him to make the first move. Mallory, you know him better than anyone. Where would he go? What would he be after?" Mallory looked down at his hands, thinking for a moment before speaking. "He'll want to reclaim the mask of Merithium. Without it, his power is limited. But now that the Time Guardians have locked it away, he'll be looking for something else. Something to regain control over time." Jade frowned. "Another artifact?" Mallory nodded. "There are others, not as powerful as the mask, but dangerous enough in the wrong hands. The hooded man has been searching for them for years. If he can't control time directly, he'll try to manipulate it in other ways." Valerie exchanged a glance with Cody. "So we need to figure out where these artifacts are before he does." Mallory hesitated. "It's not that simple. The artifacts are hidden, some of them are lost to time itself. Others are guarded." Jade narrowed his eyes. "Guarded by who?" Mallory met his brother's gaze. "By the hooded man's allies. There are beings out there, powerful ones, who believe in his vision of a world where time is controlled by the few. They'll protect the artifacts at all costs." The room fell silent again as the gravity of the situation settled in. They were facing not just the hooded man but an entire network of followers, beings who could bend time to their will. Claire cleared her throat, her voice calm but determined. "Then we find these artifacts first. We stop the hooded man's plan before it begins." Jade stood up, his resolve hardening. "We'll need to divide our efforts. Mallory, you'll help me track down the locations of these artifacts. Valerie, Cody, you'll work on enhancing the portal technology and the defenses here. If the hooded man does come for us, we need to be ready." Valerie and Cody nodded, their determination matching their father's. Mallory rose from his chair, a sense of purpose finally replacing the uncertainty in his eyes. I'll do everything I can," Mallory said. "I'm not letting him control me again." The Wells family had faced their share of challenges before, but this was different. The hooded man's return was inevitable, and they had to be ready when it happened. As the storm outside began to rumble, the family quietly set to work, preparing for the battle they knew was coming. The next morning, Jade and Mallory stood in the lab, sifting through old texts and holographic maps. Their search for the artifacts had begun, but the information was fragmented, the clues buried deep within history. "I think I found something," Mallory said, pointing to a flickering image on the screen. It was an old map of an ancient city, long lost to time. "There's a legend about an artifact hidden here. The Orb of Calanth. It's said to control the passage of time in a localized area." Jade studied the map. "Calanth. I've heard of that. The city was destroyed centuries ago, buried under sand and rock. But if the orb is there, we need to find it before the hooded man does." Mallory nodded. "I'll prepare the equipment. We'll need to move fast." As they prepared for the journey, Valerie and Cody were busy in the adjacent lab, working on the portal system. Cody was fine-tuning the energy readings, while Valerie monitored the security systems they had implemented. "I don't like this," Valerie muttered, her fingers flying over the controls. "We're walking into unknown territory. We don't even know if the hooded man is tracking us." Cody glanced up from his work. "Dad and Mallory know what they're doing. We'll be ready if anything happens." Valerie sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I hope so. But something about all of this feels wrong. I can't shake the feeling that we're walking into a trap." Cody paused, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe. But what choice do we have? If we don't act, the hooded man will find the artifacts, and we'll be out of options." Valerie looked over at her brother, her eyes filled with concern. "I just don't want to lose anyone." "Not again." Cody gave her a reassuring smile. "We're not going to lose anyone. Not this time." Later that afternoon, Jade and Mallory activated the portal, stepping through to the sands of what was once Calanth. The air was dry, the remnants of ancient structures barely visible beneath the desert's shifting dunes. Mallory led the way, his knowledge of the hooded man's operations guiding them through the ruins. They moved cautiously, aware that the hooded man's followers could be lurking anywhere. "This place feels wrong," Jade muttered as they approached the heart of the ruins. Mallory nodded, his expression grim. "It's been like this for centuries. The orb's power warped the land. Time doesn't flow normally here." As they reached what appeared to be the entrance to an underground chamber, Mallory paused, his eyes narrowing. "We're close. The orb should be inside." But before they could enter, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, cloaked, and unmistakably familiar. The hooded man. "You've come for the orb, haven't you?" The hooded man's voice echoed through the ruins, cold and menacing. Jade stepped forward, his fists clenched. "We're not letting you have it." The hooded man chuckled, the sound sending a chill down their spines. "You think you can stop me, Jade? You, who barely understands the power of a kismet? You're out of your depth." Jade held his ground, his gaze unwavering. "Maybe. But we're not backing down." The hooded man's gaze shifted to Mallory, his voice dripping with disdain. "And you, Mallory. My greatest disappointment. You could have ruled time by my side, but you chose weakness." Mallory stood tall, his voice steady. "I chose my family. You don't control me anymore." The hooded man's eyes flashed with anger. "Then you'll both fall." In an instant, the air around them crackled with energy, and the ground began to tremble. The hooded man raised his hand, summoning the power of time itself as the battle began. The fight was brutal, and time itself seemed to bend and warp as the hooded man unleashed his power. Jade and Mallory had barely made it to the Orb of Calanth when the hooded man materialized in front of them, his cold eyes gleaming with dark purpose. His hand raised, summoning the forces of time to his will. The air crackled with energy, the ground shifting beneath them as if the ancient ruins were alive and angry. But before the hooded man could strike, Valerie and Cody burst through the portal, arriving just in time to join the fight. Valerie's sharp mind had calculated their arrival to the second, and she immediately assessed the situation. "We're not letting you do this alone," Valerie shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos as she ran to stand beside her father and uncle. Cody followed, his hands already working furiously to adjust the small temporal disruptor he'd built. "We're all in this together." The hooded man's eyes flickered as he saw the entire Wells family assembled before him. His lips curled into a sneer. "So, you brought your children to witness their own demise? How touching." Jade stood firm, his fists clenched. "We're not backing down. Not this time." With a wave of his hand, the hooded man sent a blast of temporal energy toward them, distorting time around the Wells family. Everything slowed, then sped up in a dizzying sequence, making it almost impossible to stay on their feet. Mallory, using his Kismet powers, managed to stabilize the time flow around them, but it was clear the hooded man was toying with them. Valerie, quick to react, ducked behind a crumbling stone pillar and began setting up a device she'd brought with her, an energy modulator that could disrupt the hooded man's control over the local time field. "Just keep him distracted," Valerie shouted over the roar of the swirling winds of time. Cody, always resourceful, moved swiftly to join her. "I've got the disruptor. I can boost the signal, but we need a clear shot at him." Jade and Mallory exchanged a quick look. They knew what they had to do. Jade lunged forward, throwing a punch at the hooded man, but he was too fast. The hooded man shifted, reappearing in the blink of an eye behind Jade, sending a wave of energy that knocked him to the ground. Mallory moved in, his powers flaring as he tried to lock the hooded man in place, but time warped around him, making it nearly impossible to land a direct hit. "Is this the best you can do, Mallory?" The hooded man sneered. "You've always been weak." But Mallory wasn't weak anymore. With a growl of determination, he reached deeper into his Kismet abilities, forcing time to obey him. He managed to hold the hooded man in place for a brief moment, just long enough for Valerie to complete her adjustments. "Now, Cody!" Valerie yelled. Cody activated the disruptor, sending a wave of energy crashing into the hooded man. For a moment, his grip on the timeline faltered, and the twisted reality around them began to stabilize. The hooded man snarled, his eyes flashing with fury. "You think you can stop me with toys?" With a flick of his hand, the disruptor overloaded, sparks flying as the device crumbled to the ground. But Valerie and Cody weren't done. Cody rushed forward, drawing the hooded man's attention. "Over here!" he shouted, pulling out another small device from his pocket, a temporal destabilizer he had been working on. The hooded man's eyes narrowed. "You think you're clever, boy?" In an instant, the hooded man's hand shot forward, twisting reality around Cody. A swirling vortex of energy appeared behind him, its edges crackling with raw temporal force. Before Cody could react, the hooded man slammed him into the vortex with a wave of his hand. "No!" Valerie screamed as her brother was swallowed by the vortex, his body vanishing into the swirling void. The vortex closed, sealing Cody inside. Jade's heart stopped as he watched his son disappear. "Cody!" Jade shouted, his voice raw with anguish. Valerie's face twisted with fury, tears welling in her eyes as she turned on the hooded man. "You'll pay for that!" she yelled, rushing toward him with a rage she had never felt before. But the hooded man only laughed, the sound dark and cold. "Time is my weapon, child. You cannot hope to fight it." Jade, his heart heavy with grief, pushed aside the pain of losing Cody. There would be time to mourn later, if they survived. He surged forward, striking at the hooded man with renewed determination. Mallory joined him, both brothers attacking in unison. They fought with everything they had, their combined efforts forcing the hooded man back, though he continued to warp time around them, throwing up barriers of twisted reality. Valerie, her mind racing, knew they had only moments. Her brother was gone, lost in a vortex of time, but there was still a chance to stop the hooded man. She adjusted her remaining equipment, rerouting the damaged circuits in the energy modulator. She just needed one more shot. Dad. Uncle Mallory. Hold him steady. Valerie yelled as she finished the final adjustment. Jade and Mallory moved in sync, their kismet powers flaring as they combined their strength. The hooded man struggled against them, his form flickering with unstable energy. "You fools!" The hooded man roared, but Jade and Mallory held firm, channeling every ounce of their power into containing him. Valerie activated the modulator one last time, sending a pulse of energy directly at the hooded man. This time, the impact was enough to break his control. The twisted reality around them began to collapse, the vortexes and temporal distortions fading as the hooded man's power weakened. "You haven't won," the hooded man hissed, his form flickering as time began to reject him. "You may have delayed the inevitable, but I am eternal. I will return." With one final surge of power, Mallory and Jade forced the hooded man into the void of time, the dark figures formed dissipating into nothingness. The battle was over. But the victory was hollow. Valerie fell to her knees, staring at the spot where Cody had been taken. "We have to get him back," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jade knelt beside her, his heart aching. "We will," he promised, though the path ahead was uncertain. "We'll find him, Val. We'll bring him home." Mallory stood beside them, his expression grim but resolute. "The hooded man is gone, for now. But Cody. He's somewhere in time. And we'll find him. I swear it." As the dust settled over the ruins, the Wells family knew their fight wasn't over. Cody was lost, trapped in a place beyond time, and though the hooded man had been defeated, his shadow still loomed large over their future. They would find Cody. They had to. Because the Wells family never gave up. And time, once again, was on their side. The air in the Wells household was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Valerie, Jade, Mallory, and Claire sat around the table, their minds still reeling from the battle with the hooded man. Cody was gone, lost in time, and each of them felt the weight of his absence like a heavy stone in their chests. Valerie sat with her head in her hands, staring at the remnants of the device she'd used to stabilize the time distortions during the fight. Her mind raced, playing back the moment Cody was sucked into the vortex. She couldn't stop thinking about the way the energy had twisted around him, how it had swallowed him whole. She could feel the familiar buzz of frustration building in her chest, but beneath that was something else, determination. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. It was a temporal vortex. Jade, sitting across from her, looked up, his face haggard and lined with worry. "A temporal vortex?" he echoed. Valerie nodded, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. "I think I can open another one. If I can recreate the same conditions that pulled Cody in, I should be able to track where the vortex leads and pull him back." Jade's heart lifted at the glimmer of hope in Valerie's words. "You can do that?" "I can try," she replied, meeting her father's eyes. "It's not going to be easy, and I don't know exactly where Cody is, but the vortex, it's a temporal rift, a path through time. If we find it, we can get him back." Jade didn't hesitate. "Then do it. Open another vortex, and I'll go after him." Valerie started to nod, but paused as Mallory's voice cut through the air. "No, Jade," Mallory said firmly, stepping forward. "You don't understand how the vortex works. If you go in without knowing the intricacies of time, you could end up lost. I've been studying temporal anomalies for years. I know how to navigate through them. I should be the one to go after Cody. Jade frowned, his protective instinct flaring. He's my son, Mallory. I can't just stand here while you risk your life to get him back. Mallory held Jade's gaze, his expression calm but resolute. I understand how you feel, but Cody needs someone who knows what they're doing. This isn't just a matter of stepping through a portal. The temporal vortex is unstable, it's a passage that can shift at any moment. If you make one wrong move, you could end up trapped in another time entirely. The room went silent again as the gravity of Mallory's words sank in. Jade clenched his fists, his frustration and helplessness boiling beneath the surface. Every instinct told him to go, to protect his family, but deep down, he knew Mallory was right. Time was unpredictable, and Mallory's experience with temporal forces far surpassed his own. As the tension hung in the air, Claire suddenly stood, her movements decisive. She had been quiet throughout the conversation, but now she stepped forward, her face set with fierce determination. "I'm going with Mallory," she said, her voice steady but filled with a mother's resolve. "We're going to get Cody back. Together." Jade's eyes widened in shock. "Claire, no. It's too dangerous. You don't understand what you'd be stepping into. I can't let you do this." Mallory, standing beside Claire, shook his head. "She's right, Jade. It would be unwise. The vortex is unstable, and we have no idea what's on the other side. I don't want to put you at risk." But Claire's gaze never wavered. She stepped closer to Jade, her voice soft yet unyielding. "He's our son, Jade. I'm going. I can't just sit here, hoping for the best. I have to be there. I have to bring him back." Jade stared at her, torn between his fear for her safety and the deep love he felt for his family. He could see it in her eyes, this wasn't something Claire would back down from. She had made her decision, and nothing was going to stop her. "Claire, please." Jade began, but Claire cut him off, her voice stronger this time. "I'm going to get my son back, Jade. No one can stop me. Not you, not Mallory, not even the hooded man if he's out there. I am going with Mallory, and we will bring Cody home." The silence that followed was thick with emotion. Jade closed his eyes, his heart aching. He knew there was no changing Claire's mind, but that didn't make the fear any less real. Mallory, standing beside Claire, nodded, accepting her decision. "I'll make sure she's safe, Jade. I promise." Jade opened his eyes and looked between the two people he loved most in the world. He could feel his resolve crumbling, the protective walls he built around himself and his family falling away. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he nodded. "Okay," he said quietly. "But you both come back. You bring Cody home, and both of you come back to me." Claire reached out, placing a hand on Jade's cheek, her eyes softening for a moment. "We will. I promise." Valerie, who had been watching the entire exchange with silent determination, stood up. "Then let's do this. I'll get the equipment ready to open the vortex." Mallory and Claire exchanged a look of shared determination before turning toward Valerie. Jade watched them go, his heart heavy but his faith in his family unshakable. As Valerie worked to set up the equipment, Jade couldn't help but feel the weight of what was about to happen. They were stepping into the unknown, but they were doing it together, bound by love and the fierce determination to protect each other. In the dim light of the lab, the air hummed with the energy of the temporal equipment Valerie was preparing. The machines pulsed with life as she recalibrated the settings, fine-tuning them with a precision born from both desperation and brilliance. Mallory stood ready, his eyes fixed on the machines and the swirling temporal energy they would soon generate. Claire was beside him, calm but resolute, her gaze never straying from the task at hand. Jade watched from the edge of the room, his heart racing, torn between hope and fear. "It's almost ready." Valerie said, wiping the sweat from her brow. When the vortex opens, I'll stabilize it as much as I can, but there's no telling how long it'll stay open. You'll have to move fast. Mallory nodded. We'll be ready. Claire squeezed Mallory's arm in a silent gesture of solidarity. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. She was ready for whatever was on the other side. She was ready to bring Cody back. Jade stepped forward, his voice low but full of emotion. Claire, please be careful. Both of you. Claire turned to him, a soft smile touching her lips. I will. We'll bring him home, Jade. We'll all be together again. Jade wanted to believe her, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. He reached out, pulling Claire into a tight embrace, holding on as if he could somehow shield her from what was to come. I love you. Jade whispered into her hair, his voice choked with emotion. I love you too. Claire whispered back, pulling away just enough to look into his eyes. We'll be okay. Valerie's voice broke the moment. It's ready. I'm opening the vortex now. The air in the lab crackled as the portal began to form, a swirling vortex of light and energy tearing through the fabric of time. The force of it was immense, and Jade could feel the pull of the temporal rift even from where he stood. Mallory and Claire exchanged one last glance before stepping toward the vortex. The energy hummed louder, the swirling light casting eerie shadows across their faces. Jade watched as they approached the portal, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to stop them, to pull them back and keep them safe, but he knew he couldn't. This was the only way to bring Cody home. Mallory turned back, his eyes meeting Jade's one last time. We'll get him back. I swear it. With that, Mallory and Claire stepped into the swirling vortex, their figures disappearing into the blinding light. The portal closed behind them, leaving Jade and Valerie standing alone in the lab, the silence that followed heavy and oppressive. They'll find him, Dad. Valerie said softly, her voice filled with quiet determination. They'll bring Cody home. Jade nodded, though his heart ached with the weight of uncertainty. All he could do now was wait. And hope. As Mallory and Claire stepped through the swirling portal, the light faded, and they found themselves standing in what appeared to be Jade's lab, but something was wrong. There was no familiar hum of machines, no equipment scattered across the countertops. Instead, the room was barren, as if it had been abandoned for years. Dust hung in the air, and the once lively space felt eerily quiet, like an old rental house long forgotten. Claire frowned, her instincts immediately on edge. She walked over to the window, wiping away the dust to get a better view outside. What she saw sent a shiver down her spine. It looked like their home, or something close to it, but there were differences. The yard was overgrown, the paint on the house was peeling, and the surrounding area felt deserted, as if life had drained away from it. Something's off. Claire said, her voice low and filled with concern. We seem to be home, but everything looks different. Mallory stepped beside her, surveying the scene. This can't be our home. Not as we know it. He thought for a moment, the familiar calculations of time and reality spinning in his mind. We may have gone into the future. Claire turned toward him, her face hard with determination. We don't have time for this. We have to find my son. Mallory nodded, understanding the urgency. You're right. Let's focus on Cody. 3 days passed as Mallory and Claire navigated the eerily unfamiliar version of their world. It became increasingly clear that something was very wrong. The streets were empty, the people they encountered seemed distant, as if disconnected from the life they once knew. There was no sign of Cody, but Claire refused to give up. Every night, she stared out at the strange, twisted version of their home, willing herself to believe they would find him. On the third day, as they walked along a dirt road leading away from the house, Claire spotted a figure in the distance. He was walking slowly, his posture relaxed, as if he had grown used to this place. As they got closer, the man turned around, and Claire's heart skipped a beat. His eyes locked onto hers, and he froze. "Mom?" the man shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. Claire's breath caught in her throat. "Cody?" she whispered. Before she could even process what was happening, the man ran toward her, his face lighting up with recognition. He threw his arms around Claire, pulling her into a tight embrace, and then turned to hug Mallory with the same intensity. Mallory and Claire exchanged a bewildered look before turning their eyes back to the man standing before them. He looked older, his features more mature, his body lean and muscular from what seemed like years of training. But those eyes, those were Cody's eyes. Claire's voice shook as she asked, "Cody, is that you?" The man smiled softly and nodded. "Yes, Mom, it's me." Claire pulled him into another hug, her emotions overwhelming her. "But you're older." Cody stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "The hooded man didn't throw me into the past or the future. He threw me into a parallel universe. I've been stuck here for 5 years. Claire's eyes widened. "So that's why you look older." Mallory watched Cody carefully, noticing the change in his demeanor. He had gone from being the quick-witted, eager boy they knew to someone who had lived through years of hardship, someone who had fought to survive. Cody nodded. "Yeah. I'm 23 now. I've been here for 5 years. The jade wells of this earth found me after the vortex dumped me here. He took me in, and we've been fighting together ever since. But this Jade, he's not my father. He's different." Claire's eyes filled with tears, both from relief and the sorrow of the time they had lost. "I can't believe you've been here all this time." Cody looked at her with deep sadness. "You don't exist here, Mom. Neither does Valerie. And Mallory. Well, you do. But it's different. This world. It's not home." As Cody finished speaking, Mallory stiffened, sensing a presence approaching from behind them. He turned, expecting to see Jade, his brother, but what he saw was the Jade of this parallel Earth, walking up the road, his eyes narrowed in confusion. As this Jade approached, his gaze locked onto Mallory. "Mallory? I thought you were on reconnaissance behind me. How did you get here before I did? Anne. Who is this woman?" Mallory glanced at Claire, then back at the alternate version of his brother. His hand moved to the back of his neck, a nervous gesture. "Cody, do you want to take this one?" Cody stepped forward, placing himself between Claire and the alternate Jade. He took a deep breath. "Jade, it's complicated. I'm from another universe, a parallel one. My mother, my uncle. They're not from this world." The alternate Jade blinked in surprise, his gaze moving between Cody, Claire, and Mallory. "You're not?" He paused, processing the revelation. "I thought you were dead, Cody. I saw you fall in battle. When you thought I was dead, after that battle, when everything went wrong, the Time Guardians from my world found me." Cody explained. "They saved me and brought me to that abandoned house, the one that Mallory and Mom came into. That was where they healed me." Mallory and Claire exchanged a glance, understanding dawning as Cody spoke. "The Time Guardians from my world aren't bound by linear time." Cody went on. "They can go anywhere, past, present, future. They can even cross into parallel universes. They healed my wounds and left me there to recover." The alternate Jade's face softened slightly, though his confusion remained. "Time Guardians? Parallel universes?" he muttered, shaking his head. "I thought the Time Guardians were just legends here." "They're very real," Cody said firmly. "And they've been watching over me, even after I got stuck here. They knew I couldn't return until the vortex opened again." The alternate Jade rubbed his chin, processing this new information. "So you've been stuck here for 5 years, fighting alongside me?" "Yes. Cody replied. But my family didn't know where I was. They thought I was lost, or worse. The hooded man threw me into this universe as a way to separate us, but the Time Guardians intervened just in time. The alternate Jade stood in stunned silence for a moment before finally nodding in understanding. So you're from another universe. He took a deep breath, the tension in his body easing. That explains a lot. The alternate Jade looked at Claire, his expression softening. You must be his mother. I'm sorry you had to go through this. Claire stepped forward, her voice strong and filled with resolve. We're taking Cody home. We're going to bring him back to where he belongs. The alternate Jade nodded slowly. I understand. But Cody, we still have a fight here. The hooded man of this earth is still out there, causing chaos. I need your help. Cody looked at his mother, then at Mallory, and finally back at the alternate Jade. I'll come back and help, I promise. But I need to get home first. We need to take care of the hooded man on our earth. Then I'll return. The alternate Jade smiled sadly. I'll hold you to that. As the group stood together, the weight of their parallel realities pressing down on them, one thing was clear, no matter which universe they were in, the hooded man remained a threat. But with Cody reunited with his family, there was hope. And they weren't done fighting yet. As Cody walked up the hill with Mallory and Claire, he turned around and shouted at Jade. Hey, Jade, just to let you know, on my earth, I am a Kismet. Jade shouted back, well, that explains a lot. As Cody turned back around, Mallory asked, what's with Jade's funny-looking costume? Cody turned to Mallory and said, that's not a costume, Mallory. The Jade of this world is a legendary Kismet. He's a teacher and a mentor. Mallory responded, saying, you'll never catch me wearing something like that. Cody laughed. You do. The Mallory of this world wears one similar, but a different color. Mallory just shook his head in disbelief. The Jade of this world turned around and walked down the road, muttering to himself, you could have led with that Kismet thing when I first met you. Then Jade smiled and said aloud, you're like the sun I never had. Mallory stood at the edge of the overgrown yard, the sun beginning to set behind the distant hills. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, silver device, the temporal key that Valerie had given him before they stepped into the portal. It hummed faintly in his hand, a reminder of the fragile connection between worlds. Let's hope this works. Mallory muttered, glancing at Claire and the older version of Cody who now stood beside them. Claire's eyes were filled with determination, but there was a tension there too, a mother's fear that something could still go wrong. She hadn't seen her son grow up, but now that he was standing here, older and stronger, she would do anything to bring him back where he belonged. Mallory pressed a sequence of buttons on the temporal key, and the air around them began to shimmer. The familiar swirling energy of a temporal vortex started to form, the gateway between worlds trembling with uncertainty. Is it stable? Claire asked, her voice tight with concern. Mallory studied the vortex, the patterns of light and energy shifting rapidly as the portal solidified. It should be. We don't have much time, though. Once it's open, we need to move fast. Cody stepped forward, his face a mixture of hope and wariness. Let's do this. Without another word, the three of them stepped into the vortex, the swirling light swallowing them whole. Claire felt the familiar disorienting pull of time and space warping around her, but she kept her focus on one thing, bringing her son home. Moments later, they emerged on the other side, stumbling slightly as they landed in what was unmistakably Jade's lab. The cool, familiar air filled Claire's lungs, and she exhaled a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. They were home. Jade and Valerie were waiting, their faces etched with tension and anticipation. The portal had barely closed when Jade's eyes fell on the group, and for a split second, confusion clouded his expression. His gaze locked onto Cody, the older, more weathered version of his son, and Jade's brow furrowed. Who? Jade started, his voice uncertain. Cody stepped forward, his movements more deliberate, more measured than the boy Jade had last seen. He met his father's gaze and spoke softly, "It's me, Dad." "It's Cody." Jade's heart skipped a beat, recognition dawning as he took in the man standing before him. "Cody?" His voice was thick with disbelief. Cody nodded, his face breaking into a familiar smile, though it was tinged with the weight of the years he had spent away. "Yeah, Dad. It's me. I've been gone for a while." Valerie stepped forward, her eyes wide with astonishment. "Cody, what happened to you?" Cody looked between his father and sister, and then at his mother, who stood quietly beside him, her eyes misty with emotion. He took a deep breath before explaining. "I wasn't thrown into the past or future when the hooded man opened that vortex. He sent me to a parallel universe," Cody said, his voice steady. "I've been there for 5 years. Time works differently over there. I got stuck, but I survived." Jade's heart ached at the thought of his son being lost for so long, but he forced himself to focus as Cody continued. "The Jade wells of that earth found me," Cody said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "He's not you, Dad. He's different. But he took me in, trained me, and we fought together against their version of the hooded man." Jade's breath caught in his throat. "You've been fighting all this time?" Cody nodded. "Yeah. Their world isn't exactly like ours, but they had their own battles to fight. I learned a lot. But..." Cody paused, glancing at Mallory and Claire. "It wasn't home. None of you were there, Mom, Valerie, Mallory. And I missed all of you every single day." Claire stepped forward, unable to hold back any longer. She wrapped her arms around Cody, pulling him into a tight embrace. "I can't believe you're here," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. 5 years. And you've grown so much." Cody hugged his mother tightly, feeling the warmth and comfort of home finally settling over him. "I'm here now, Mom. I'm back." Valerie stood beside her father, still in shock at seeing her brother. 5 years. I can't imagine what you went through. But we're going to fix this. You're home now, and we're going to make sure the hooded man doesn't take you away again." Jade, his eyes still fixed on Cody, finally stepped forward and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I thought I'd lost you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But you're here. You're home." Cody looked up at his father, his eyes filled with the same determination Jade had always seen in him, even as a boy. "We still have work to do, Dad. The hooded man isn't just a problem here, he's causing chaos in the parallel universe too. I promised the other Jade I'd help finish things there." Jade's breath hitched. "You've been fighting him this whole time?" "Yes," Cody said, his expression grim. "And we've made progress. But we're not done yet." Mallory nodded, stepping forward to join the conversation. "If you're planning to finish the fight over there after we take care of our hooded man, we're not letting you go alone." Claire stepped up beside Cody, her hand still resting on his arm. "We're in this together. No matter what universe we're in." Cody smiled at his mother, and then at the rest of his family. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Jade took a deep breath, his heart swelling with pride and love for his family. They had been through so much, but here they were, together again. "We'll help you finish it, Cody," Jade said, his voice filled with resolve. "We'll stop the hooded man once and for all, no matter what it takes." And for the first time in a long time, Cody felt a sense of hope. He wasn't alone anymore. He had his family back, and together, they would face whatever came next.